how do we actually change our life? Many of you might be listening to this. We're talking about more business, more life. And then we're like, okay, well, when, where, how, when do I make these decisions? Why do I make these decisions? Can we really have freedom in today's modern society? Like, what does that look like? What does a job look like? What does a company look like? What does a business look like? We're going to talk about all of this. It's going to be a brainstorm of like, what's really important. And then how do we start to choose our own freedom so we can create that? And we're going to explore all that and more. It's going to be a real big fat brainstorm on a lot of ideas. So you can, and our hope is that you can start picking parts that work for you to make change in your life, to have more freedom right now. Let's jump in.
If you're listening to a podcast about having more of your life, what would you really want to hear?
Well, I got the first thing that popped in my head right when you asked that is that it's possible. I think there's a delusion that, oh, that's like a fairy tale to be able to be successful and have your life.
What came up for me was what life could be like. It's also a mindset change, though, as well, because I think when you start thinking about, for me, it was like, my dad worked and we had a good life. So I have to work so I can have a good life. But really, your whole concept of, no, design the life you want and then work, and then design your work to fit into it.
You and I, Steve, we've always said it's no longer the balance, like when you say work-life balance, because whenever I think of work-life balance, I always think of the scale of one way, whichever one you're going towards, the other one's going to go off balance.
Right.
And that's why we always say work-life integration. And that's where more business, more life comes in, where you're creating your life first, because that's where everybody goes, flips it the other direction. Everybody puts their business first, business or work life first, and then where does their family or personal time fit into those open slots there? Where we're saying, no, build your life first, put all the stuff that you actually want to do and live, because we weren't created to work. Like, work is a human constructed thing, right? Like before the industrial revolution, before that, like caveman days, we were just trying to survive, like fighting food and stuff like that. And we created this whole concept of work and money and all that stuff. And so I think we've really gotten away from like life living. Like, there's a quote that I heard a while ago, but then it recently came up in my mind, is like how many of you, something like how many of you are really living, or are just here? I forget how it goes, but as the concept of like, are you actually living, or are you just here, kind of going through the motions, kind of a thing? So flip into that paradigm shift, right, Melissa, that you're talking about, is like life before business, and intertwine them, make them so that you can have both. And that's not the either or kind of a thing. It's the and, right? That you always say, Steve. It's the and.
Yes.
And I think if I had to do it all over again and tell my 20-year-old self something, that would be like the first thing I would say is design your life first and then figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that would solve, so I'm glad I think that would solve like a lot of issues, because a lot of people, and I still see it today, even like on YouTube and other platforms, of people saying they were just following what their parents' dream was for them, right? Was like being a doctor, lawyer, accountant, or something where, and it's usually what I've noticed is immigrant families, kids of immigrants, where, the parents came here to have a better life, and they wanted their kids to have, make money so that they didn't have to struggle and all that stuff. But then you hear these stories, and like, kids that went to like Harvard and like Princeton, Ivy League schools, and they're miserable because they were trying to reach a goal that their parents had set for them so that their parents would be proud of them and all this stuff. But then they were miserable, and like, somebody wanted to go do something more artistic or something, completely quote unquote left field of whatever it was they were driving towards. But then like they're miserable, right? And then they're not having a good life and whatnot. So it's like, yeah, like if you can tell a 20-year-old, 18, 20-year-old how to choose their life, I think Alan Watts talks about it a lot, right? Of like do something that makes you happy, and you'll find money, find ways to make money in that thing, and you'll be happy at the same time.
Well, because if you're happy doing what you do, you'll tend to work more. And then if you do it more, you're going to actually become an expert. And when you become an expert, you'll get paid a good fee for it, no matter what it is, whether it's being a magician, I mean, we see this today. People are making millions being video gamers, or, you know, YouTubers, or even as when I grew up, it was like, you know, people used to make fun of people that were spending so much time skateboarding or doing those things. And then out of that generation emerges Tony Hawk and all of these people that became millionaires doing the thing that looked like the waste of life. What are you doing with your life? And the reality is, if you spend a lot of time in anything, you will become an expert. And when you become an expert, you'll be sought after in that thing, even if it's a brand new field. And that's why as we get older, we have to look and say that I think this happens generationally always, right? The older generation looks at the new generation going, what the heck are you doing with your time? Only because we don't realize it's a brand new thing that's going to be a big deal. And then that child is going to be an expert of it because they saturated themselves with it. You know, so even being homeschoolers, we've gone to a lot of conferences, my wife and I, to like learn how we can do better to teach our kids. And some people use what they call unschooling method, or where you build the curriculum around the student. And I remember one dad saying that, oh my gosh, my kid never learned is not learning math. They don't want to learn math, and they weren't trying to like put pressure on that. Well, then he's really starting to get worried by the time the child turned 13, and they had not spent much time with math at all, like very rudimentary, and very concerned, the father was. But then he said all of a sudden his son wanted to make a catapult just for fun, but he wanted it to be accurate and wanted to be able to hit targets, so that within a month's time, his son went from basically only knowing how to do addition and subtraction to all the way to trigonometry and beyond the father, that he could no longer keep up with his son in math. And he said that it was like in a month's period, and he was building catapults that could hit on target bullseyes because he learned the geometry of the arc and how to do it and how to make the catapult and all these things. And so then this brings back to what we're talking about here. What is the motivation? So what is motivating us to learn, to live, to all do these things? And I think the mistake is made that we think, okay, we have to build ourselves into society. We have to make money, and the goal is money. And then if you have money, then you can figure out life. And what happens is we just keep making money, and then you find no happiness because it's just money is a tool. It's like saying, I want a house, and you just buy a bunch of hammers. That's not going to build you a house. It's going to give you the tool to build a house. But if you don't actually build the house, so what are you doing with the money? And, you know, so, you know, there is commerce that can happen. There are things we want. And then when you're motivated. So I think to what you said, Melissa, what are we motivated, for? And if we actually look at that, what I do believe there's an innate thing inside of us. We're born with certain gifts. You'll see people that are extremely talented in certain areas. And I think that's why feelings are important. I think that's another thing that we overlook are our feelings. And we get caught up in this space where we ignore those. And that is a shame, because it's those feelings that are telling us clues and real life like direction. And you can even call it divine direction, where you're getting, universal information that's coming through you or from you, however you want to look at it. But so if you look deep down, we all really know what we want. And the way that you can tell this, even if you're not really clear on it, is what makes you have joy and brings bliss into your life, and what makes you feel miserable. And if we actually, and again, going back to the feelings, if we would listen to those, you would actually start being directed to what you're meant to do on this planet, and find a lot of joy in it. And no matter what it is. And I think then coming back to kind of cap this all off is that we find ourselves excited about something, and maybe immediately we don't know how that could create a living for us to live in today's world and the way in modern society, the way. And again, that's another thing that's been developed, as you said, Giovanni, has been put on us, not really a direct choice, but now living in modern society, then we question, oh, if I like art, how am I going to pay my bills? And then that real question comes up, and then that stifles us. And it's like, oh, I better just get a job. And then we find ourselves getting older and older and more miserable. And then that's why you have the picture of the old man yelling at the kids to get off his lawn, because he's grumpy.
Yeah.
You know, it's
But
you know,
the other thing I was gonna just jump in and say is a lot of what you're talking about, I think also just re-emphasizes that point of work-life integration. Because when you can merge kind of your personal and professional interests together, you know how they say, you know, you won't work a day in your life if you love what you do. And I think, you know, when I was in corporate, anytime I had the opportunity to incorporate some sort of community service into my corporate job, it was just like Zen for me. And so, you know, having come out of a corporate position and then create a company that is really focused on impacting the community, you know, and the people in so many different ways, you know, whether you're looking at your own self-care, whether we are focusing on, you know, our life and the impact we want to make in our life because it's so short. In, you know, that integration is critical to really align you with your purpose.
It really is. Absolutely. And then and look at how much different it is. Like you said, it goes back to the feelings. You felt a difference when you were acting on those activities. So I think in a way we're either denying or accepting what we really feel innately inside of ourselves. And I think that's where the no pain, no gain, I think, really messes with us. You know, I definitely know in my younger years, I'm like, you know, all these people that have made it, you know, that I'd seen, they're all saying, oh, well, if you have no pain, you're not going to gain. And it's so ridiculous now looking at it for me to say no pain, no gain, no pain, no gain. That it's no gain. Like, really? Like, so when you're not in pain, you're not gaining. And I didn't really think of it that way. I just accepted it. And I know it was really bad for me. I know for a fact in my earlier years, I was looking for pain. And when it hurt, I'm like, great. Oh, this is so good. What am I going to gain? You know, and that's good because there could be some gratitude in it. But I was seeking the pain and I was taking myself further into the fire instead of listening to my feelings. It's like putting your hand on a hot grill and all your body wants to pull your hand off. I often use this metaphor, and you just leave it on there, burning and burning until your nerve endings are gone, right? You've burned them off. You don't even feel it. And then, you know, to your point, Melissa, like you've said this before too, then you wake up one day and you're like, what do I even want? Like, I don't even know. And why do I have my hand on a hot grill? I don't even know. Like, you just wake up and you're like, what am I doing? And then there's where there's a lack of purpose. And then and then you just feel horrible. So I think, you know, I feel like you first have to wake up to your feelings. And that means you have to even give yourself space. To your point, Melissa, you said many times you didn't even know what you wanted. Like when you finally got later in life, after doing this for decades, what do I really want? Well, you know what? You have to and find yourself. We get so lost in they call it the rat race. You're like running on the treadmill. And when you're running, how do you know what you want? Like you can't even think straight. So the first step is to slow down enough to find that. And that might be scary, right? Because how do you do that? Can you take a sabbatical? You know, I mean, I think a lot of people don't ask, but like, have you ever went to your management and said, hey, can I take some time off? Like sometimes you might be surprised. I know a number of people, they're like, okay, well, we'll give you a paid sabbatical for 3 months or more. And then all of a sudden you could find yourself. What a blessing. And maybe your company won't have that, but why wouldn't you ask? Right. And then look at what you could do, or if you could stack up your vacation and go, but don't just go work. Some people take their 2-week vacation and they do all their housework because they had put that off forever. So now they really didn't take a vacation. Or you go on some big holiday with your family, and then that's like work too. I've taken my kids to Disneyland, and then you need another vacation after the vacation. So I've been there and done all those things. And the reality is we need time with ourselves. And I've done it twice now. Twice in my life, years apart. Like I did it once, and then about 4 years later, I did it again. I took 2 weeks of solitude. Both times I chose to go to the Amazon, where there's no cell phone. You couldn't do any of those things. You just shut off and you're with yourself. And I had never done that for many, many work years of my life. And it's kind of scary too. And I'm a parent. So I had never like shut off my phone and not had contact with my family for 2 weeks. But I prepped it. I planned it with my family. I planned it with myself. But actually giving yourself that pause then wakes up the inspiration in your life, that part of you that's been sheltered, or not sheltered, but suppressed or ignored. That's another word. You're ignoring who you are, and you kind of let it start to come out. So I know I'm jumping to like what I did, but it just piggybacking off everything that's been said. Like, what do you do? How do you find yourself when you've been in this race for so long for maybe the wrong reasons?
Yeah, I think the conversation you're talking about with just, kind of going inside yourself, because that's really the deep work, is to understand yourself. It's really easy when you're trying to, work with a customer or build up a client or deliver a product or whatever it is you're doing. But when you have to turn the mirror on yourself and say, what am I here for? What do I really want to do with my life? What kind of impact do I want to leave, or legacy? Then I think you just start to you start to have to reframe what your definition of success is. And I think Giovanni, or you might have said that earlier, but I think a lot of times we do associate success with that no pain, no gain, grind, hustle, and, I know I grew up, my dad being a workaholic, he always had at least one second hustle. Could have been third or fourth, but he always had something else he was doing along with his full-time job, that was like his own business, or, whatever it was. And so I think I grew up seeing what that grind was. And I actually was like, well, I don't want to have my own business, because that's like, you work way harder than you do when you work for someone else. But then, you kind of start to reframe what you think about success and why people go in to have their own business, because they want to impact the world in a different way. And a lot of the companies, they're doing things a particular way, but the reason it's so important for CEOs to create their own companies and their business is because they want to be able to change the way we do business, or what we offer or how we offer it. There's some other value that they're bringing that is not out there, that's giving them their competitive advantage. And so I just think, as we think about what we want, you begin to reframe your mindset in terms of what success really looks like.
Well, and I just popped in my head as you're saying that, Melissa, let's redefine what a business is. And many other people have done it. I'm not saying I'm inventing this by any means, but the reality is your father had a self-employed business as a side hustle, which then is unlimited, which is different, right? Like, so you could work hours and a company will only let you put in so much overtime sometimes. It's not like, there are some businesses, maybe you could put gobs of overtime and make more money, and you can through your labor increase the amount that goes in your paycheck. But what I think, when people find that side hustle, they start a business, right? Maybe you have to get a business license. So like, we use that term very loosely, like you're creating a business. And what really you're doing is you're creating another job for yourself. And then thereby, like, what happens is a mechanism of making additional income, but you have to put the hours in because there's no one else. And that's why many people will say that you don't have a business until you have a team. Because, this, many people have said this, Robert Kiyosaki wrote the quadrants, right? Like in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that you have on the left side, it's working people, like employee or self-employed. And then on the right side is business owners and investors. Because when you own a business or you're running a business, then it should be many hands making light work. And even one of our clients who's become a friend of us, Jim Blachek, he's also been on the podcast, I think like episode 54 or somewhere around there in the 50s. He says that you don't have a business until you have employees. And then, because that's where then it goes back to our African proverb: if you want to go somewhere quickly, go alone. And so there is something about that. That's why that side hustle can be attractive, because really fast you could add to your income, but you got to sacrifice your time because it's just you. If you don't show up, nothing's going to happen, right? But if you can actually transcend that, and that's what More Business, More Life is about, we have to create systems, procedures, which also includes team, which then thereby changes the definition of a business. Do you have a job? So your father, Melissa, unless I'm wrong, and I'm just jumping in on this, but he was an employee and he was self-employed. So he basically was doing both operations on that working side of the quadrant. If we want to start having more autonomy in our life, then the reality is we need to create a system where we can have many hands making light work, and it's not all resting on our shoulder. And there isn't an absolute on this. Don't get me wrong. Like, there are people that are self-employed and they also have a few employees or some contractors, and that's there. And then on the other, but really we want to transcend that. And that's, how do we do what we love and not become workaholics, and I guess just to cap this, I totally relate to this, Melissa, because that's what I did, right? I left working for other people to have my own business. And then, but really I created my own self-employment instead of actually having the freedom of having a business or being an investor. So I think I was just trying to define those definitions and then even show a little bit of where it goes wrong in our mind. And then to you, you're like, oh, business ownership sucks. Well, really, it's self-employment could really be like take your life away.
Yes.
So I would make a little caveat on that, just because today's world, you could be a single person, depending on your business, right? You could be a single person that has it mostly automated, right? Online business, where it's just you kind of doing that stuff. So I would kind of say in my head, because I used to think like I had a business as a self-employed headshot photographer. I'm a small business owner. Like, that was false. That's not true. Because if I didn't work, then there's nobody working, right? But if you have a business where you can step away and you're still making money, I would say that's a business. Like, even if you're just by yourself, working by yourself, because I've seen tons of people who
look at another client, or just and then you continue, Giovanni, but Rhett Asseler, right? Yep. Like, he either ran his Amazon business or now he has Historic Prints, where he sells open to the public, like old pictures of bridges, old maps. Yep. They recreate that. He does have a few assistants that work for him, so he's not like solo, but he doesn't have like hundreds of employees. And then you're able to have a really, really good life and work like, 1 day a week.
Yeah. And he can step away, right? I don't know with Brett, because I think at some point, I think he was still printing the stuff himself. But like, I think if you can just step away from your business and it still runs without you there, like, I think that's a business. If you're self-employed, it's like, self-employed to me is like, if you leave for whatever period of time and business just stops, then you're self-employed. That's not, you don't own a business kind of a thing. But anyway, I just kind of want to throw that in, because like, I've seen people who have are making millions of dollars by themselves, having some kind of online, it's typically some kind of online e-commerce or something that they do, right? Where they can kind of step away for a while. But anyway.
No, I think it's a great point, Giovanni. And, the ultimate would still be possibly to have an employee or a partner so you could take turns monitoring that business. But yeah,
Mm.
you've really, really reduced the hours because it doesn't have to be. So I guess you're right. Like in that, let's include that it doesn't necessarily have to be all employees, and you don't have to have some mega business where you have like hundreds of employees. Like we're not saying that. And to Giovanni's point, you could use computers now. Like, I mean, so that can be your staff. Like people
Mhm.
used to, have assistants that book their calendar. Like now
Yeah.
we use Acuity. Like we don't need to have someone booking meetings for us anymore. A computer can do that.
Yeah. I think, and that's kind of, I'm glad you said that, because like that brings back kind of our earlier conversation of where it's like you don't have to follow the what society is telling you of what a job is, right? Like there's so many more, because I think with technology, so many jobs are getting um turned over to like artificial intelligence, or just being able to automate things through technology, that now people have less. And we've talked about this before, but it's like we're not getting rid of jobs, we're just creating new opportunities for people to have different types of jobs. And I think that there's so much more opportunity for creative stuff, to be a creative in many capacities, because certain manual labor stuff is going away, right? I mean, like fast food restaurants, they have like robots making you don't even talk to people anymore. You can just push buttons to order your food, and eventually it's going to be automated, where there's literally machines just cranking out the food and whatnot. I mean, you can even see that at the airports. You go like make coffees, there's like a big old robot arm making coffees for you and stuff like that, sandwiches, all this stuff. um so it
Have
gives
you had one?
opportunity. I don't drink coffee, so I didn't,
Well, yeah,
but
I was just wondering if it tastes different because like
I
they like grandma's cooking always tastes different, even if you have the
yeah.
same recipe. Like, is our robots going to put the love in the
I was
food?
I was
That's
gonna say, can
interesting.
you program love into the into the robot?
Probably not.
Not yet anyway. We will see when,
I,
um
yeah,
but yeah, it's like it's opening up opportunities for people to be more creative, and because more people can then, if you have an expertise, you can share that and teach, right? Like more and more people, like I think information is become like is I can't remember how big it's growing, but like it's getting into the billions of dollars of teaching people a skill set, right? And my favorite thing that you've ever, not my favorite thing, but one of my favorite things you've ever said about like types of businesses that are out there was the bronies, the
yeah,
adult men who love My Little Ponies. Like there's a brony con, which means people gather together, men, adults gather together and either talk about or buy stuff. Like, so like if they can have a business and a thrive in their own con, like convention, like there's seriously no limit on what you can do to make money and to make a
yeah.
living in this world. Like there's so many different possibilities for people to do whatever. And if you've been in an industry for so long and you're at the top, you're the CEO, you created your own business, whatever, and you're not happy within that, then there's so many different ways you can pivot and change and whatnot. But I think it come back to it's really defining what a successful life is for you, right?
Yeah,
Because we talk about
yeah.
what does success mean to you, like business wise, but what does a successful life mean for you?
Well, and
You
it
know?
just comes to mind to reinforce everything we're saying. Simon Sinek, start with why. If you
Yeah.
haven't picked up that book, it's a definite read. Right? You want to see that. This is what we're talking about. Start with your why, and don't be afraid that you can make money. And that's why I think it's great that you brought up bronies. And I took my kids to Comic Con. I think we've gone a few times now, and I remember one of the years for sure that bronies had a huge booth, like big compared to the others. I mean, so they spent money in order to have that. So then you're like, okay, well, that's, anyone else said that, oh, let me tell you about a proposal. We're going to do this community called Bronies, and it's for men only that like My Little Pony. You'd be like, you're crazy. Like, that's not going to work. Well, there's enough people. And that's what also works with technology. If we go back in time, if you were in a village and there was one kid that liked My Little Pony and grew up and still liked My Little Pony, you would be like the weird one in your community. But the fact that you can go online and then say, oh, wow, look, there's one in all these different cities. Now there's like 1,000 of us. Now you have a movement that wouldn't have existed without technology. So going back to your point, Giovanni, and I think that's we just can't make mistakes to overlook the potential of any one thing. And this is the time, I guess in a way, this is like a new renaissance, because you even brought it up earlier in this recording, Giovanni, that people didn't work if you're like a caveman, or in the early indigenous tribes, you woke up and you figured out how you're going to get food for that day, what amount of things you're going to have to do. I think someone told me, I can't remember what book I was reading, that average work in a tribal scenario is about 4 hours of work. That was average. Like maybe there's something happened during a weather storm, or you had to move, or if you're a traveling tribe, maybe it was different, but average would be like 4 hours of work a day to make a dwelling, to like a place of shelter, to have food, whatever it was. And that was it. Then you would just enjoy, make music and things like that. Then, and so in a way, like, but everyone's working to the same. Then when you start creating different ways to do things work, that's when I think they say that's how the Renaissance came, because people really couldn't spend time on art because they were working. But I wonder, is that true, right? Because if we look at it, there's a lot of art, like, you could talk about cave drawings, oral storytelling, that's an art, dance, making the garments for those dances, music. There was a lot of things happening. Then I think, to your point, Giovanni, like you have work starts applying, that, okay, now now you're going to be a farmer. Like, okay, so you're going to wake up every day and you're going to have to do that work. And a lot of people argue, well, that allowed for other people not to have to make their own food. So then they were able to paint all day, to create music all day. So then, that's why they call I believe, I'm not a historian, but that's like when the Renaissance period came and all these arts were prolific because, you didn't have to create your survival any longer.
Yeah, you no longer had to go search for food and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that, the invention of farming really made it so that humans no longer had to continue to be nomads and search for food. It allowed you to stay in one space to then have food and then continue to grow as a society, and then got bigger and bigger, right? So the invention of farming really like made it so that we could have what we currently have as cities, which is a good thing, right? I mean, like I'm not bagging on how it is, but it's like I think we're now at a point in history that more and more people can choose to do different things that we wouldn't have been able to do maybe 20 or 30 years ago, right? With the invention
that's
of
what I'm saying.
internet.
Is this the next Renaissance?
Yeah.
Well, no,
yeah.
continue. I mean, is this the next one? Because now we have so much more automation and so many more collective work and a global workforce. Can many hands make such light work again? Like, even can we go back to tribal essence where we could, work in 4 or 5 hours and then create, or, that's what I'm questioning. Are we coming with technology and global connection? Because now we can literally talk to anyone around the world for free.
Definitely.
I think there is a shift. It's funny, like, I am getting back to the balancing in certain aspect. You can be extreme on either end of things, right? And so for me, like technology and like old ways, right, with food and medicine in the old days, and I think like medicine today like has its place for certain things, like better see, right? Like with Guillain-Barré syndrome and everything, like you didn't take any of the medicines that they wanted because you said it was going to numb your mind and all this stuff. But at some point you do need those. It's like I'm in this in between of like, okay, we can't go too extreme of technology and all this other stuff, but we can't go too extreme in the back when we got like quote unquote like hippies and like people who are just like, let's just take me back to pre-penicillin days. I'm like, yeah, penicillin's pretty good for you guys. We can use that. But it's like, but I've talked to so many people who want to create these communities again, almost like little villages. Like people are so tired. I don't know if we're getting off topic here, but are so tired of how mainstream society is with the high anxiety, high stress, mental issues, mental health is down and all this stuff. And I've talked to so many people who I want to create retreat centers and healing zones for people to come farm, practice different modalities of healing, whether it's yoga, meditation, energy, sound, um, breath work, whatever it is. So many more and more people. And I think it might be just maybe it's the millennial generation and younger that are starting to see that I'd say, quote unquote, like kind of the toxic poison that society has gotten to with all of the excessive work and, this just came to mind, but hedonism of stuff, like so much drinking and alcohol and drugs and stuff like that, and overworking. And it's like, it's compensating for the lifestyles, right? You work hard and you want to just relax. And a lot of people will take in, drugs or whatever to help them forget or release that anxiety and stress and whatnot. And it's like
uppers and downers, because you wake up and you're drinking, whether it's caffeine or something harder. I mean, they say that's how Heath Ledger died, because he was using energy medication to like boost him and then you're so high that you need sleeping pills at night to calm yourself down. And so that's an extreme, right? You're literally using pharmaceuticals to chemically drive your life. And ultimately it gets so extreme that you accidentally overdose. Now, I don't know 100% on all that activity, but I know I heard that. And I think that can be on a lower level with drinking a bunch of caffeine and then not being able to relax at night. So you drink alcohol. So that can be like a lower level of what we're talking about when you're having pills. So I think you're onto something there. And I think that, I don't have enough history on this, but yet I'm learning. But, there are people that say that with the farming practice and such, that's when we lost our freedom. Because if you control the food supply and the healthcare, boom, where are we? So, and that was what I really liked. During 2020, one of my teachers told me that 6 million gardens were started. If you can start to have those things, and I think we don't really know the complete impact on pharmaceuticals, although there's a lot of evidence, but we're only 100 years. So there was like 1933 when penicillin was brought in. And I read a book about gut health. And before that, they could pinpoint if you were constipated or different things, then all these different ailments would happen. And so they used to really focus on gut health and heal more people. And there's the guy that wrote, I forget his name. He wrote a book in the 1990s and he lived a really long life and he didn't use the drugs. He basically just cleansed his gut all the time and he was able to stay healthier than others. So I think the key thing I'm noticing from all the homework I've done is it's preventative. And I think that's where we get stuck in Western society is like, okay, I'm going to go get my food, which by the way has been highly produced, highly refined. It's not really natural foods. And it's also been poisoned by pesticides. So, which now noticing, that's the thing that bugs me, is we're fighting cancer and we're fighting all these things. Fighting is a key word for me, like that I don't want to do. In reality, I think if we remove the chemical, and I'm not a biologist or any of those things, but just from enough evidence, if you remove the chemicals from your life, most likely you're not going to fight those things because literally our body is trying to filter out all this stuff that really isn't supposed to be there. And then we're working aftermath. We're trying to cure something that I think this is my own feeling and opinion, we created. So if we could actually get back to natural foods, having a real tomato that hasn't been polluted, and we have stress relieving practices like yoga and such, we actually have our own medicine and also start to have our own freedom because we're not locked into a system that creates this need.
Yeah. When I think too, like kind of on that point is like, there's something about, I think I heard like on the Joe Rogan, he had a guest and they're talking about like some of the happiest workers are like farmers or people who are working with their hands like outdoors, right? Because like, I mean, if you think about it, we as humans haven't evolved to be at the point where we're at with technology, right? We evolved over very, very long time. But our technology expands so rapidly, right? I mean, from the invention of the first computer to where we're at now is insane. In like, I don't know, less than 60 years or something like that. It's crazy. I mean, even with the airplane, right? From the Wright brothers to today's airplanes, I think it's like 60, 70 years now, maybe it's a little more. But to think of like where you went from these wooden framed cloth wings to rocket ships and stuff like that. So like in my head, we haven't moved past that caveman ability of not abilities, but caveman persona of working with our hands in nature, in the sun, right? Like having shelter is good. So 1903 airplane invented.
Yeah, I looked at, I was trying to be faster than you, and I still can't be. Yeah, 1903, and I think the first computer, believe it or not, the world's first fair, they had it in the late 1800s, and it was a woman. I forget her name. I wish I could remember. She's quite famous, but she had the first computer. But obviously, it took many more years to make it become a bigger usable tool. But I mean, we're talking the very first, like just like the very first plane, it took many years before it became popular, right?
Yeah. So 120 years now from the first airplane to rocket ships, right? And traveling space kind of stuff. But it's like we haven't evolved to the point of like of just being in our homes or buildings all day, right? Like we are of the earth, right? We are of the universe, right? Like I love what Neil deGrasse Tyson's like, we're all made of stardust or all star stuff, right? Like we are from the universe. And so like we need to be a part of that. I think there's a big detachment from nature, right? In our everyday life. That's why I love when you say, you know, like, hey, you need to take a break, just go step outside for a minute, sunbathe, just like like when I get a moment. And because I'm guilty too, like since my my dog passed away, like she was my break manager. And so like you get into it, you know, you're like you say, Steve, you're excited about what you're doing. And, you know, sometimes you forget you're in the zone, you're in the flow of things. But the times that I do remember, like, oh man, I need to step outside, go for a little walk, or just let the sun hit you in the face. And like, you can feel your energy level go up. Like you just go, like, you know, like Mario Brothers or something, just you see it go up. But yeah,
it makes a big difference. And I did, just to add in the conversation, Ada Lovelace, that was the woman, and she passed away in 1852. So it's a very rudimentary computer, but she was a mathematician. So I guess it was early 1800s. She was born in 1815 in London. And yeah, so she's claimed to be the first computer. And anyway, but still, to your point, Giovanni, this is 100, 200 years of all of life, a human existence.
Years,
it's like crazy how fast we have evolved. And so I think also we're getting wiser, like you're saying, the generations now, Giovanni, are questioning, like, okay, this looked like it was going to help us, but does it? It's like, like we can question a lot of things like plastic and all these things that look like wonderful and great, but then now we're like, oh, wait a minute, this is kind of polluting us. And BPA and all these things that we notice are hurting us. And so we have to now have certain types of plastic, or ultimately like move away from plastic, or so I think, it just comes with life. There is some trials that we think something is good, but then as you get older and years pass and we start seeing the side effects, so I think ultimately you could say this has been a wild ride of a conversation, but but what are we talking about? We're talking about life. A lot of times I mentioned this a lot. People say, are you a life coach or a business coach? And I say, well, I hope you don't die when you go to work. I mean, the reality is this is all of our life. So what we're really bringing up and posing the question is, what do you want? What life do you want to live? and you can choose. It all comes back to that choice. And I think that what we do is we scare ourselves. So as we were contemplating what to talk about on today's podcast, it's like, why do we think that it's pie in the sky that we can choose our life? And then look at all the evidence we're talking about. There's so much technology. There's so many new ideas that if you put enough time in any one thing, you can have success. You can become an expert skateboarder. You can be an expert at video games. You can, whoever knows, like, we don't even know all the things. I mean, how many things no one has any idea. And because we're globally connected, billions of people, you can have a fragment of the world population, but it can be global, and you can actually have enough commerce to make a actual decent living. And then that's the key thing, like, what is success? So we also have to add in the definition of that, because if you think you have to be a billionaire to succeed, well, then I always would ask you, well, what will having that do for you? What will having that do for you? And it goes back to the why, because I think it's easy for us to catch on a point like, oh, I just want to have a big house. Oh, I want to have a pool. Oh, I want to have a plane. Oh, I want to, have this or that. And is it really giving you what you want?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, why are you working? Like, it's like, why are you working? Like, what are you working for, like, in your life? And one of the things you ask, like, you've said it, and then I've heard Tony Robbins ask, is like, well, like, what do you want? And then have you ever looked to see how much it costs? Right? You think, like, how much, when you ask people, how much do you want to make? And like, millions of dollars. Well, why do you want to make millions of dollars? So, like, have this, and this. Well, have you ever, like, seen how much those things kind of cost you? And he's like, a lot of times people over exaggerate how much they need to live.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what things cost. They just have this, like, kind of number in their head. It's like, I think $1 million is, like, become that arbitrary, like, number for people, just a number for people to hit. But then they don't look. And I think we might have discussed this on a podcast a couple episodes ago. The speaker that you talked to, who you wanted to do all those fun things, and you're like, wait a second, didn't you just say that you went on helicopter rides, yachts, and all this other stuff? And, like, because he was upset that he didn't meet his financial goal, but all the things that he mentioned that he wanted to do, he had already done throughout the year. And it's like, yeah, I think just as society, we're so focused on the number thing, right? Almost like even like with GDP with countries, right? It's just a number to base things off of. But, like, is it Burma or something like that? Like, they don't have a GDP, they have, like, a happiness scale, like how happy they are as a country, rather than, like, how much exports and whatnot they're producing. And it's like, what's our happiness level as a country? Like, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And it's just looking at it differently. And, like, I think it's easier to have a number to look at, to kind of quantify things for people. But getting back to what you said initially, it's like, what's in here? Like, what's in your heart? Like, what do you feel? Like, what is your intuition telling you? Like, I think that's more important. I think that's where we're starting to come back to. I think we've let technology and evolution of technology take us to where we're at. And I think people are starting to notice that, hey, we're missing something. And even science is starting to catch up, right? Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, they're talking about this and seeing the science behind what we once called woo-woo stuff, right? Even like meditation at one point was like super like, whoa, meditation, that doesn't do anything. That's not, but now they can, like, quantify, Buddhists and people who are really into meditation, who can control their wavelengths and brain waves and all that stuff. And, like, we're starting to get back into the old way of, like, I think it's like Asian philosophies, right? Buddhism, Indian religions, of, like, they already knew this stuff. And now science and technology is starting to catch up to be able to quantify what they knew. And so now we're starting to get back into those ways of thinking and those ways of life, and saying, hey, these things are missing from current life. Which again, technology is not bad. It's a tool, right? It's a thing, but it's like, when we fully rely on that stuff rather than us as our own tool, right? Going back to the hand on the hot plate, the grill. If you don't listen to your body on that, then, like, you're gonna die. Your hand's gonna burn off. You're gonna burn. It's like, you need to be able to trust and be able to listen and hear yourself, right?
That listening is the key. I think that's even what I define meditation as, because prayer, it like, a lot of times you just think of it as asking for things. And I think, to your point, Giovanni, I think that we say Eastern religions nowadays because more of them have in public space kept their practices. But I think even when you look at Christianity or any spiritual practice, it really is having time to be with spirit and yourself, and I think, and then that's why I think we look at Western society that we've lost those practices because of the hustle, because it's like, oh, I got to go work. And so then you maybe have a day, you give yourself a Sabbath, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, depending on your family heritage, where you came from, or what community you've joined. Ultimately, I think all of that, to me, as I've looked, the successful spiritual life comes with time. Like anything, you have to, if you want a successful relationship, you got to give it time. If you want a successful garden, time, so what are you choosing and why, I think, is ultimately the question. Why are you giving time to what? And then what are you doing about it? And I think it's all great points that you're bringing up, Giovanni, that, where are we focusing and why? I think that's we talk about this a lot. The why matters. And I think the thing that also I wanted to add into this right now is that I think more population choose evolution or over revolution, right? It's a small amount of our population. And this has statistically been like I think Milton Erickson, there's been people that studied overall population and the way that we choose things. And so a small amount of population wants extreme change constantly. And those are the people that we'll see in our life. They always have a new car. They always have a new partner. Like they can't keep anything, right? They always change. And it's usually like 10% around of the whole entire population of the world. And then a very few population don't want any change. Those are the people that eat the same dinner. They kept the same job their whole life. Again, small amount of population. I'd say 70%, I think this is from Milton Erickson, they just like evolution. And then that can take into this point, but sometimes the confusion with evolution is that we can't have change. Sometimes we feel that it's moving slower and we can't have change. So I think this whole discussion of choosing that you want a different life, but then not being willing to make the change because you think it has to be radical. And that's where people get scared because like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and I already set up this house and I have kids now. And oh my gosh, this is radical. It is radical thinking, but it doesn't mean you have to implement this radically. You can actually set up a smooth transition if you set yourself up for when are you going to transition? How are you going to transition? And make a plan. But the first thing is choosing. With all of our discussion today, it's like choose the life you want. Yes, you can. And with all the things we have, all the technology, all the automation, then this is what we need. And then you can say, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And then when? That's a thing we haven't talked about so much. Like when is a good time to do this? And, how do you start? What's the first step, second step, third step? Don't think because we're talking about this that you have to like quit your job, live in pain and misery until you start your new path. You can actually start creating the path while you start changing your life and then migrate over in a good way and evolve instead of, have evolution instead of a revolution, but yet still invoke change in your life. And it's a heck of a lot happier.
And if you love what you're doing, but you're working way too much, you can still gradually have the evolution of the life that you want as well, right? Because we don't have to stop what we're doing. But if you love and you're passionate about what you're doing and you're successful in it and you want to spread it to the world, like Melissa was talking about earlier, people starting business for good, but you're just not able, you're not having the personal life that you want. Like it can be a gradual thing too, right? It's not that radical thing. That's when people don't do stuff, right? Like, okay, I got like 5 different things I need to change in my life. And they try to do them all at once. And then they do it for maybe a week or less or a couple of days and it just like falls off, right? But it's that gradual building the habit that will give you long-term success.
And we could talk about transition, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, and maybe it's one that's warranted. Maybe we always talk about what topics we should have, but maybe it is, how do we transition when it's scary? Maybe we should note that down. I'm going to write that down too. Yeah. I guess today is really about why to even think about it. And then, is it possible? I think that's the thing. We kind of started with the question today, I want a different life, but it's scary. And I think, ultimately we really talked about why, and we want to live now, and, life is going to pass by, and we all have enough stories where you lose a family member, or like for me, how being paralyzed, like losing the ability to move my body, and even have the fear, is this the end? Is this the way I'm going to die? Then what am I choosing becomes very, very high on the list. And I guess, what I would really like to share with everyone listening, don't wait until something tragic happens for you to choose your life. Choose your life now, and then figure out how you're going to achieve that so that it's not scary. You don't have to radically quit everything, go live in a box, and now you're free, but you have nothing.
I was just going to say, though, it can be scary. It will be scary, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was like, okay, I'm totally outside of my comfort zone. But then eventually you become comfortable with being uncomfortable. So it's okay. It'll be scary. Yes, it might scare the socks off of you, but it's okay. Just do it. Do it anyway.
I think, and it's just different. I often say that, like, what is success? I think we define, but the reality is we don't know what our success feels like. And that's what messes with us. You start stepping into new territory and it feels different. So then we get freaked out. It's not wrong. So then you think, oh, am I wrong? But it's actually just new. So you have to discern, like, this is new. It's okay. I'm still alive. I'm breathing. It would be like if you stepped onto a new planet. Like, can I breathe here? Oh, yeah, I can. Okay. It's like checking the boxes. Am I okay?
But as a CEO, you are walking by yourself a lot of the time. And I think that's where you begin to understand, like, if you haven't been a CEO before, I don't know that you realize how lonely it can be sometimes, because you're setting your course. You are designing the life, and at the end of the day, everybody needs to be the CEO of their life. But I think it's easy for us to kind of delegate that to something else until you realize, no, I want to step into myself, have an alignment with my purpose, and really provide the value on this earth that I'm here to give,
Yes. It's that's why we say create your freedom. It's not just like poof, there it is. You got to choose it and then create it. And that will allow, then it comes to the step by step, like anything else a CEO would do. It's like, okay, we need to move into this market, or we have to change our product. Okay, what's first, second, third? So I think the same principle, I like that you said that, be the CEO of your life. And Giovanni's thinking we should make a t-shirt of that. I think that's a good idea. That you have, that you choose what you're going to do, and then build a structure around making that happen. And I think that's what we're really talking about. And then that even includes transition, right? Like, not many companies quit making their core product and make a new core product. I'm sure it's happened in history here and there, but most of the time you start making the new one, and then you transition away from the old one, and you start making things happen. I mean, sometimes there's been like where a product completely fails, or history moves on or something, and then you have to make a new one. And those some companies have survived. Other companies that don't change, they die with the change of the industry. So, and I think that's also what we brought up. The world is changing right now, like it or not. Things are moving But there's one thing that's the same, us humans, and we can have the life that we want. Just choose that and then start designing it step by step. I think that's it. So ultimately, what I've learned from after being paralyzed, what are the experiences I want in my life? How do I design that into my life? And then basically then I start to achieve that. It's really hard to design something or build something if you don't have it designed. It's going to take a lot more time. So I think hopefully this has been a helpful exploration. I think we need to wrap up here, keep us on time. But the idea is the concepts that came. I hope this has been, like, in a way, a brainstorm for anyone listening today to what is possible, and you can choose, and that there is some framework. And the framework really first is to start with why, like Simon Sinek says. Why do you want this? And if you're not sure, then you need to get time for self-exploration, so that and that means usually most people that don't know, they've been grinding so long, they've not given time to themselves. That's what I found after all these years. So that means you have to take a time out. You need to take a holiday. You need to take, probably more than a long weekend, which also can be uncomfortable, right? But it's what you need to have a better life. And the first time I did that, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I really going to go away for 2 weeks, away from my family, away from my company? And then I decided to do it because I knew that I would come out a better man, because I would find more of my own joy and happiness, and I'd be a better husband, a better father, a better leader. And that came true. So and it's still scary. I had never, like, shut my phone off for 2 weeks and disconnected from the world, So, so this is, so that's it. It starts there. Then once you decide that, then you start to design it. And then when you're designing it, then we figure out how to do it. And I think that's, if I were to cap it off, and if you, Melissa or Giovanni, if you want to add anything in here on that before we close out, I think that's the mistake. I think we go right to the how, and then we can't figure that out. And then we just don't do anything. And then we get stuck in the same life that we didn't really want.
And that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing to add there.
Well, start there. We'll keep adding more stuff. I think we took some notes to some future podcasts, like how to transition through the scariness and different things. Could be a whole nother topic that came out of this conversation. I hope this is useful. Please let us know, comment, question, tell us if you agree, disagree. We're welcome to all of that, because that's a healthy conversation, so that we can all be better. We can all learn from each other. And so we're welcome to all your comments. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, share it with others, so that we can really help the world see that they have more choice. And you can always remember, as we end this, choose gratitude and create freedom. We love you all, and we look forward to seeing you, hearing you, being with you, sharing on our next episode. Thank you.